All right, I'd like to call this meeting, the West Oswego Milwaukee School Board to order. Sarah, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Carr?
Here.
Ms. Deal is excused. Mrs. Kaiser?
Here.
Mr. Burns?
Here.
Mr. Becker?
Here.
Mrs. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Sikich?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Here.
President Lee?
Here. All right, so thank you here for the workshop. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Robinson to start us off.
So good evening. We have an opportunity tonight to gain a little bit more information concerning the instructional as well as strategic approach that we're taking to improve student performance in our district. And so I wanted to start out by saying that this has been an ongoing conversation. This is nothing new. Unfortunately, there was we met some comments saying that I hadn't talked about instruction. I thought that was pretty hilarious last week, but this has really been the thing that we've been really focusing on. For displaying right now, we have a logic model that was presented to the board last year. Okay, this model was to serve as a bridge for our work up until tonight. And so tonight we're showing you the next steps in our strategic approach as a district. Okay. So the logic model again that we presented to the board on last year was it set up various one goal, and the goal is to increase the number of schools meeting expectations are higher from 8 to 14 by October 2024. We have not received our official ratings yet, so that still has time to come to fruition. But in the meantime, we're ready to now sail. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But what I want to do before we start is kind of remind the public about some of the things that we've been working on for the logic models. The first one is the guaranteed and viable curriculum. As you can see, we completed that particular goal. We ensure alignment for deeper learning competencies and GBC as well, aligning with standards. That's also complete. Develop a core resource adoption cycle process, and that's something that we are currently still working through, trying to make sure that we align the adoption with budget and making sure that we're not trying to invest in 3 or 4 adoptions in 1 year, because that can definitely be costly, but trying to make sure that we create a budget cycle for that. Also working with ALSA through our continuous improvement process, and that was actually started when the leadership team last May got together, including myself, the leading and learning team, as well as our special education team. We completed a 2-day training where we established some goals as a district, in addition to working on our theory of action for the district. The purpose of that particular training was to sort of do the pre-work that would then be cascaded down to our schools. And then our schools worked on started that process in the summertime and created their own theories of action, their own goals that address their efforts of school improvement, as well as their school improvement plans. We're currently in that cycle, and we will evaluate those through a 100-day plan. That evaluation will occur, I believe it's November is the time frame, October, November. And then the GCT plan is another one. We completed that last year. And then letters training, that's actually still in progress. We've completed it all through most of our DLCs. However, we do have some DLCs that have been onboarding this year, so they're now going through that training as well. So all of these things that I'm mentioning around school improvement, including instructional rounds that we've instituted last year, focusing with school leadership on defining problems of practice, all those types of works are sort of a huge puzzle. What we try to do though now through the SAIL process is to really put this in a more organized format and have it district-wide, structured district-wide, and cascading through the schools. The real work happens at the school level. It's up to the district to organize and to assist with how that work looks. The district is responsible for establishing goals. Schools are also responsible for establishing goals that align with the district goals. As I find myself talking too much right now, I will now kind of turn it over to Alyssa Barrage and her team who have been assembled here. And we're going to talk through our next phase of strategic planning for the district and improving as we continue to improve student outcomes. I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to walk us through kind of an overview of what is SAIL, just to ensure everyone in the community understands what that process really looks like. I'm going to share kind of what we've been through already since May till now, and then what that will look like moving forward as this is a forever ongoing process. So SAIL stands for School Administrators Institute for Transformational Leadership. And this is through ASA, our state agency has been supporting us, and this is a program that they do through their learning. It's a common research-based framework and problem-solving process for continuous improvement. So when we say SAIL, we're really talking about, we're trying to take, as Dr. Robinson said, all those good pieces of things we've been doing and put it into a continuous improvement process. So it's forever ongoing. And it's not like one-off efforts to get at transformational change within our system, as well as impacting student learning and their outcomes. So through SAIL, one of the big kind of aspects of it is creating a shared understanding and focus around each school's biggest work. Right. And then that leads to like cultivating trust with the staff, as well as the family and communities that are going to be learning about SAIL and their theories of action and all that through the school level throughout this school year. The hope is also to build and deepen and distribute leadership across the building. So SAIL is only successful, or this process of continuous improvement is only successful if everybody within the school is contributing to the plan and an authentic part of making the work come to life. And then as Dr. Robinson mentioned, there are 100-day improvement cycles. So I'll explain a little bit later what that means. But it's regular opportunities for schools to reflect on the work, create action plans that align to their big goals, and then ensure that we are actually making progress towards those big goals. So the overall purpose of SAIL, and this comes from ASA and the SAIL School Administrators Institute, is helping you build focus and coherence of your system's improvement agenda related to short-term cycles of intentional action, leading to significant adult practice and student achievement gains over the long term. So when we look at this, we are focusing a lot around student outcomes, but we're also focusing a lot on adult practice. So how do we build in systems so everyone within our schools knows like kind of their role and their part to impact continuous improvement for their students and for their school as a whole. But kind of more locally, like our why in West Dallas, West Milwaukee, why we thought it was important to bring the SAIL learning to our entire leadership team, including having a district team, is really that first bullet point from the last slide, which is build coherence across our schools in how we engage in continuous improvement to impact student learning. So having cycles of continuous improvement, how we set and monitor progress towards our goals, as well as aligning best practices around instruction that increase student success. And so you'll see here on the left-hand side is the coherence framework, and that comes from the Boland book Coherence. And that's like a grounding, I'm blanking on the word, book, but text that we're using through learning throughout this entire 2 years process. And so for this first year, we're focusing on the upper half of the coherence framework. So really focusing direction, and that includes like defining goals and setting goals. And we as a district have really like led the way, a district team, in creating those goals, and our school goals align with our district goals. So that's an example of a kind of the focusing direction, and then also cultivating collaborative teams. So the timeline, what has this looked like since May? So we assembled a district sale team that went through the first 3 days of training in May. And so that includes all the members of the leadership and learning team, as well as the SPED or inclusionary practices team and Dr. Robinson. So that's kind of our initial sale team got together those days, and that's where we set our goals as a team, as well as district, our theory of action. Like, what do we think as a district is going to move the needle? And I'm going to share our theory of action here in a second. Then what was beautiful about this process, and I'm really glad that I was able to kind of collaborate with ASA and their director, Dr. Schrader, on this, is like, I was like, we're really not going to be able to support schools if we're doing this alongside schools. So some districts will do it all the same time. Right, so us doing it ahead of time allowed us to both set a vision and share our theory of action. And it allowed everyone that you see here on my team to really sit alongside schools and support them in that process a few weeks later when they went through it June 11th through 13th. So every school has a sale team, and that includes their entire leadership team, as well as 2 teacher leaders. So that's who is comprised of their team. And then in those 3 days, they went through the 10 key mileposts. So I'm going to share kind of what those are here in a second. Then in June and July, they continued to finalize their theory of action and working on their 100-day plans, which is like the first cycle of action steps that they're going to take. And they started to meet monthly. So a beautiful part of also engaging with ASA and doing SAIL is that every team has a coach. So our district team has a coach who's coming in and holding us like accountable to this process to make sure that we are also staying true to what we set as our goals and our actions, intentional actions. And then every school team also has a coach that is directly pouring into them and supporting their SAIL work. Then in August, all schools launched their theories of action with their entire staff and began sharing their 100-day plans. If you were at opening day, you saw me share our theory of action. I also shared it with our new staff as we welcomed them into the district in August. So everything in the light blue, that's we've done that work so far, right? But then the second half you see there is really like, where do we go from here? So right now we're in the middle of our 100-day plan. So we're really like implementing and moving on actions that we said, if we do these things, we are going to see a change in adult practice and ultimately, ideally, in student outcomes. So in September and October, that's where we are right now. Then November 1st, the entire team, district team, all school teams will come together on that day and have another day of learning with SAIL. So that's going to be another like really like step away from your building. We're all focused in on learning together. And that's going to set the next 100-day cycle into effect. So then there'll be, and we will be implementing from December through March, our next 100-day cycle. Then we have another day of intentional learning with ASA on March 31st of 2025, if you can believe it. We're already planned out that far. And that will then set the next 100-day cycle. So again, you see, like we're trying things, right? We're assessing if it's working, and then we're coming back together to get some new learning. And I think it's elevating kind of the collective efficacy of the entire leadership team, as well as the leadership and learning team and inclusionary practices team. And then we will start this cycle again in July. So in July, we'll come together as a team and kind of start year 2 of this process. So all of that will be repeated for another year. And the goal is after 2 years, we as a team have gone through this like learning together. We've gone through this cycle together, these many cycles, and we'll be able to then continue the work beyond, right? Beyond our time with ASA and SAIL. So as I mentioned, in the initial 3 days of learning, there were 10 key mileposts, and I know it's a little small, it might be a little bit easier to see on your handout. There were 10 key mileposts that all schools and we as a district team went through. So you'll see it's just a nice progression from we started with like, what is our root cause analysis? And in order to really get at the root cause, we had to look at the brutal facts around our data. That's the phrase that they like to use, brutal facts. So of all the data we see, what is the data that is like the most important for us to pay attention to? And that is what then sparks us to set our ambitious goals around learning and achievement. Then we went into, again, figuring out, okay, what's the cultures of our building? What ways do we need to adjust as a district team to support our growth of people? And the same with staff. And then we went into the defining our theories of action and so on and so forth, creating 100-day plans. So you can kind of see the progression, how each milepost builds on the other, so that in the end, every district, our district and every school team went into the year with a pretty clear plan of how they were going to support their staff and what was their areas of focus for the school year. And that really comes through in their theories of action. So I'm going to share once again our district theory of action, and we are very lucky to have a school with us who's also going to share their theory of action. And you'll kind of see how they're similar and then also a little bit different depending on what is the need and what's the area of focus for the school. So for us as a district, we kept revolving around this term, high quality instruction, grade level explicit instruction. And so we said, if we provide every day high quality grade level explicit instruction that incorporates differentiation and scaffolding, then in the bottom two, you're going to see these outcomes. So we have two different goals that we're monitoring at the very bottom, the so that and the thereby goals. And then in the middle, in the white, you're going to see, or the light on your black and white, it's the lighter squares. You're going to see kind of our big intentional buckets of work. So we talked a lot about, like, we need to define what high quality explicit instruction looks like. Everyone, if I asked everyone here, they would previously, especially to our work this summer, might define something different. So we need to define, what does that really look like, so we can start to have some common language around that and expectations around instruction. And then all building leaders' capacity and grade level standards and the most impactful instructional strategies. We've been working on building a comprehensive system of professional learning and making sure our learning is aligned to the areas that we're asking leaders and staff to lean into around instruction, and then increasing data literacy through consistent data cycles. And that's something that Corey Sack and our team has really led the way with for us this year. So we're saying, if we really do all those things, we're going to see on our local assessment, which is the so that statement, all students who score in those two categories, low risk or college pathway, which are the higher two categories on FastBridge, and reading and math, they'll make typical growth, which means they will at least make a year's worth of growth. So students who are on grade level or above grade level will stay there, right? If we provide really great quality instruction, they will stay there. And then students who have some risk or high risk, which are the lower two categories in FastBridge, will make aggressive growth. And as we know, that means over a year and a half or more. That is the only way we can close learning opportunity gaps that have existed for students. And so we know that we need to provide and differentiate and scaffold intentionally so that we can meet that goal. And then the thereby statement connects to our statewide data through Forward and ACT, and that's all student subgroups will have a value add score of 3 or above on our state report card. And so the state report card, again, if you remember, we went through that in October or November last year. We'll be able to do the same this year. And our hope is over the next year or 2 years, we're going to start to see a shift that all of those subgroups are growing the average amount in comparison to their peers. And right now we are not. We are below that threshold of 3, which is like average growth. And so the hope is, again, if we're really pouring into and we have progress monitoring this closely, we're going to see that outcome on our state level data.
So just to clarify, the subgroups are the low risk college pathway some risk, high risk, or what are our subgroups?
No, so our great question. So the subgroups on, and I wish I had an image to show you. The subgroups on the state report card are all connected to Forward or ACT, and they're divided by race predominantly. Correct, Corey? Yeah, so it'll say like American Indian or Black or Latino, and those subgroups, or it could be English learners or non-English learners, as well as students who are proficient last year versus this year. So there's different subgroups they break apart. And the really cool part about looking at that data, what's important to know is they're comparing students in that subgroup to students in that subgroup across the state. So they're saying all Latino students performed at this level across the state, and this is where Latino students in West Dallas, West Milwaukee performed. So our goal is beyond the 3.0, right? But right now, we're not having our subgroups are not performing at that level that we need them to be. And that's an important measure on the.
That was really my question was, have we broken it down by race, by gender? Like, do we see a gap in
Mhm.
math? Are we seeing those gaps? Like, I remember a while back, Dr. Raymer was talking about how, we see these huge gaps in who's being offered advanced math versus who's being exposed to advanced math at a sooner age than get there in high school. So those are concerns. I want to make sure we're not losing kids just because maybe they don't perform well in math, but they can do it, So those are little things.
Yep.
I want to make sure we're doing.
And we're able to also like look at that data and disaggregate that data through our local assessments too. Because our goal is that we don't want to be surprised. We want to know exactly, we want every teacher to know exactly like where their students are, what is the goal for that student, and how do you get them there, right? Like what are you going to do differently, or what intentional actions are you going to take as a teacher to meet the needs of every student? Which is a big task, big ask. So I'm gonna share one more slide and then I'm gonna turn it over to our amazing team that's here with us to kind of share their experience. Which is the 100-day plan. So that was our theory of action. That's big work that will be throughout this entire year, and likely much of it will go into next year. That's not 1 year work. Right, but that we know where we're headed and we have a really clear focus, and our schools really understand where we are going and how we're going to monitor progress towards that. So that's the exciting part about the 100-day plans. If you look again in your handout or on the screen, you want to make sure that when we're doing 100-day cycles, that whatever we set as our actions are reasonable. So we are being really careful with not saying yes to a bunch of different things and trying to get good at all those things at once. We're being really strategic with the action steps we're choosing to take, and all of those action steps. So you see for this first one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 action steps. All of those lead to the M1, which is we say we need to, as a district, have a set of effective pedagogical practices that are known and used by all educators, a comprehensive framework for learning that identifies goals and high yield pedagogies is articulated, but not yet consistently used. We want it to be consistently used, but given where we're starting in the coherence framework and through our reflection there, we're like, okay, we know we need to define this and we need to be able to say this is being consistently used. And how we can measure that is through our instructional rounds, as well as all the walkthroughs that our leaders are consistently doing. They're in classrooms all the time. But we're really encouraging that they're also in classrooms focused on instruction, because we can easily get swept up into a lot of different things throughout the day. But every school has defined their own look fors connected to their 100-day plans and their theory of action. Like, this is what we're driving towards. And so our leadership team is also gathering that data on a regular basis too. So those are, again, everything is leading towards getting closer to that. And then we have measures and evidence to say, like, we're on track, we're making progress in this way, or we're not. And that's something that we reflect on as a district team. So if you really think about it, just zooming out for a second, and then I'm going to introduce these amazing folks, is our district team's goal is to create the clarity and coherence for our school teams. And so we are being like, we're trying to stay one step ahead of them and share like, this is what we're working on. This is where we've maybe stumbled. Share that with them, and then they're doing the same process. But really, we're learning through this together and like, how do we get really good at being able to monitor our progress as a district towards these big goals that we have. So with that, I'm gonna welcome our so we have, again, all of our schools are doing excellent work and through the sale process. We could have asked anyone to join us, but we decided to ask principal of Irving as well as the deeper learning coach. So Chris Gosh and Aaron Dresky are here to kind of share their experience from the school level of starting to go through the sale process and sharing it with their staff. And I also am honored to share that 4 members of the leadership and learning team, I put it out, I was like, hey, if anyone wants to come share their experience going through sale. And all of them were like, I want to be here. So we have Corey Sack here. We have Joanna Bannon, Keith Buffalo, as well as Jody Landish. So they're going to talk a little bit about like how they are supporting the schools in their work. But let's start with Irving, and I'm going to turn it over. I gave them these questions. You can kind of go wherever you want to go, Chris and Aaron. And I do have your theory of action and commitments up here that I'll just leave up and then let y'all kind of share.
I feel like I'm gonna be repeating quite a few things that you've already mentioned because I was nodding my head like the entire time, like, yes, yes, and I was gonna talk about that too. So there's really not a lot new. So I just want to reiterate, just we're really excited about the whole sale process. One of the first questions was, what has sale afforded us as a school? And for Aaron and I, as part of our leadership team, I think first and foremost, it really rejuvenated us this summer and we were re-energized, walking into the school year. I mean, that's a lot in itself, walking into a new school year, but we had such a confident feeling, just like we've got this. I mean, everything that we worked on this summer is starting to play out now with our students coming in and with our staff and our staff development. And it just feels so good. I can't even express that enough. And it is the process though. I mean, you had mentioned all the mileposts and what we had done through sale for the 3 days in June. We had a chance to not only look at what our school district is doing in systems and practices, but then we were able to dig deep into our problems of practice, that's what we were focusing on last year. But we also dug really deep into the brutal facts and what was staring us in the face and what we had in place for systems. We're digging deep, like what is working, what is not, what's working well, what is something we need to tweak. And we really were able to get to the bottom of it. And in the end, through this whole process and path, we really came up with a solid, it's a little geeky, but here's my binder that I carry with me every day with a theory of action on it. But it really is, it's all about this. This is what we are collectively working on as a staff. And we were able to take out some of the other things that are swirling around or on our plate and focus in on a couple key pieces. And if we can focus in on that, I do very, very much believe that we are going to move the needle. So it feels good to be able to have that framework and that path and know what your specific goals are. And few years ago, we sat down and had gone through this process where we've come up with a 3 to 5 year plan of continuous improvement. And we were really moving and grooving, but this, I feel like, definitely streamlines it, that our conversations, our staff meetings, the common language and expectations, it's just that, it's common across the board with everybody. And we're walking it, we're talking it, we're gonna do it together. This past week, we had one of our first data meetings and one of the teachers left and she said, it feels so good to talk about instruction. That's it. So those are just a couple of my thoughts. Because I could keep going.
I think kind of like what you said, it set like clarity, not only for us, but then when we went back to the school and we talked about like that whirlwind of things that are happening, like we've done some really good work in the past around like equity and around, like deeper learning competencies. And we still highlighted all of that stuff, but we kind of forgot about it, or like, didn't focus enough on the instruction piece. And, you know, we definitely went into this year like saying, hey, we did all this great work. Now we're going deeper and we're building off of that. So this wasn't anything new. It was just going in the place where we were. Like, we are ready to get into that deep instruction and really break down where our kids are at and what our kids need. And I've just really appreciated like the consistency of like the core resources that we're using, and that we allow teachers to continue using some of those things that they've done, but also saying like, we're narrowing it down to these are the things you have to do. I think our teachers have really appreciated that.
I just want to say you're not alone. Our schools, we've been doing the data, we've been doing all that kind of stuff, and now we're like, oh, instructional practices, what can we do better? Like all that stuff. So I just want to say, like, coming from a school outside the district, we are doing this too. Like, I'm seeing it come up now in our PLCs this year. So it's nice to see that we're all starting to meld that way, because that's, you know, what we want for our
The
kids.
foundation is still there. All
Right,
the
yeah.
SEL practices, the sense of belonging, that's not going away. We're not focusing on that. That's still our foundation. That's a hard work that we've done, and those are best practices for our kids, right? That they have that greater sense of belonging. So that, none of that's going away. What we're doing is, when we talk about deeper learning, we kind of lost sight a little bit of the content mastery along the way. And so now I feel like our focus is back on track with the content mastery within the deeper learning competencies. And SAIL was just a great way and an avenue that we looked through absolutely every little piece or aspect of systems and data that we had to be able to see what works and what maybe could probably be off of the plate for the year. And the teachers love that. They know that we have these two things. So out of our theory of action, right now, we're just focusing on the top two ifs. So we are really focusing on collective teacher efficacy. That's always been a part of our collaboration. And now, like we say, we refine it every year. What is it going to look like? We're going deeper with it right now. We're going deeper and making it more effective by looking at student data together. And that's a whole strategic process in itself. We have a whole system set up, and which teams are looking at, the data and which students, but we're going to do some heavy duty tracking on that. I feel really good about it. The other piece is just tightening up that tier 1 instruction with differentiation and scaffold. So, and we both talked about this. Last year, we developed problems of practice that we were giving feedback to our teachers when we were going in instructional rounds or the walkthroughs. And now our walkthrough tool that we are creating now, it's all around the theory of action. Everything aligns. And I love that when somebody, a teacher will notice that and say, well, okay, my PPG and my SLO. So we have those coming up at the end of the month for educator effectiveness, their own professional practice goal and the student learning outcome goal that they're going to be selecting for the year. It's all aligned here. And when they see that and have that little aha moment, it's kind of exciting. It's like, yeah, that was strategic. That was not by chance.
I think too, it's been really awesome to have teachers part of this. It's one thing to hear it from us, but they have been delivering a lot of the messages and they helped create it. So it was, with their input, we weren't just creating this pretty plan. It was something they really challenged us on a lot of things, like that's not how it works in our building. So yes, you can put that on paper, but that's not how the reality is. So to me, that was really beneficial because the rest of the teachers are like, yeah, they get it, so that was.
We're gonna keep going, and then just know if you have questions, like please pause as we go, or there'll be time at the end for more questions too. But if Corey, you want to kind of share, so again, this is our leadership and learning team. If you want to share, like, how does this inform your work with our elementary and secondary schools, and
Yeah.
everyone can share.
There was a lot in terms of data on our. And it was kind of this organic movement from like, Corey's got to do this and Corey's got to develop a system for this and Corey's going to be coaching this, to how do we build our team to be able to do this together and all really understand it. And then how do we make sure that
how do we make sure that principals and coaches understand the data, know how to work with it, and then how do we get it in front of teachers so that they're using it? So it's been really exciting to have conversations around data in a way that people really understand what it's telling them. And I think going through this process together has been great for our team in holding each other, being accountable for and to each other. So really making sure that what we're doing is part of the plan right now, that I'm not moving too far ahead and staying with the pace, but then also being able to identify, okay, so this is our first 100-day plan, what comes next? And on the other end of things, working with our principals and coaches, it's been so fun to we were at one of the new learnings this summer and I was sitting there talking to Chris, tell me where this is sitting for you. And she was like, oh my gosh, I know where it connects. And it
Do I really look like that?
a little bit. Thank you. But she did, and she was like, oh, I know. And then she sat there and pulled out her binder and she was like, so here's what I'm thinking. And for 10 minutes, she went on about where she knew she was going to be able to make this fit and connect and how it was going to move her data. And I was like, yes. So it's not just Chris, watching some of our other principals have those same aha moments is so exciting. And I can't wait to see as more of our principals are rolling their plans out and working them in their buildings, watching and hearing about teachers doing the exact same thing.
Joanna, you want to share?
Sure. Well, I mean, how does this drive the support in the buildings? I mean, it does, it is the driver. So I guess, last year we started to do some work around okay, what are our focus areas? What are the problems of practice? What kind of plans, what kind of support do the teachers need to shift some practice? But without it really consistent, number one, across the district, and without a more formal plan, it still felt a little bit every week or two, it was okay, where are we at? Here are all the things that we said we were going to do. Number one, we didn't have the leadership team established with the teachers that Aaron referred to, which I think is a game changer. Having teachers a part of that work is essential, and they aren't just a part of creating the plan, they were a part of learning together about really identifying the challenges in the building using the brutal facts. So while there still is all the whirlwind happening in buildings, it's just oh my gosh, there are all these things and we need to problem solve. This then is the grounding, okay, where are we at with our 100-day plan? It helps the team focus, and then it helps me focus, what is the coaching that needs to happen if we're monitoring our progress? I can talk about, the example, just my last coaching session of the day was, we're talking about a action item in their 100-day plan. We're noticing that how we said we were going to monitor it, we're not seeing the results. We're okay, we really thought by this time we were going to be seeing the evidence of these things that we rolled out in August. We're on week 3. We know we still have a lot of time, but we're not where we thought we were. That just prompts, now we actually have evidence to look at as because we at all of these have a measure that we're going to be looking at on our progress. I think a year ago or in the past it's kind of hit or miss, right? It's hey, we have student outcomes to look at. We have our walkthrough data to look at, but we really didn't have okay, if we're talking about common language and community and culture in our building, how are we measuring it? How do we know that is actually happening in our building, which then was an easier way to help identify, okay, so if we're not seeing the results that we wanted, what are the things that we need? What's the next piece? What kind of supports, just like we do with students, what is the scaffold that we need to provide the staff? What kind of feedback are we giving? Ooh, that might be something we can tweak. So it really is helping, I think, the support of this team. So we're not kind of all over the place, that we're this is the work that we're working on. We have their building. So anyone that comes in the building is we know that this is what you're working on at Irving, and this really needs to be where our conversations are grounded and offering support.
All right, hey guys, Keith Ruffalo, Coordinator of Elementary Instruction. So I did not get to, I was brought on a team on July 15th, so I didn't get to participate in the initial sale work. But when I found out that we were partnering with ASA and the sale team, like I was excited. So as an administrator in previous district, I've been a part of ASA as like a leadership since I started as an AP all the way through building principal. Great organization, and the sale team, the continuous improvement around it, it's absolutely awesome. So that I can say that. But so how does like this inform what I do each day? It helped me design and like partnering with Alyssa and our team to design my high impact week. So like, what does my work week look like? And how do I score? So 70% of my job is to be in school facing, in schools with working with building principals, their DLCs, teacher level teams. Like that's what I start my day at every day, going to a school and working with them on their 100-day plans, on that like system level, tier 1 instruction at grade level across all 9 elementaries. I'm more like, that's like one of my first things to do. Is to like make sure that is consistent, equitable across all 9 elementaries. Because what I want to avoid is pockets of greatness and like level that out for all kids in our system. So one of the things I've started to do right now is like, because I want to connect with our staff, you know, I've been doing site visits to each and every building. Today I was at Jefferson, last week I was at Pershing and Horace Mann, and things. So I go there, teachers sign up to meet with me. We talk about like what's going well as teaching and learning, what can we work to improve, and then I'll start to like formulate some themes and things. So but really like that teacher facing, supporting grade level teams and the work of their 100-day plan as it relates to their sale work. So after we get through like that tier 1, like kind of leveling that system out as it relates to our district approved resources, then we start looking at collaborative teams and the power of the team and how they like, how that comes, because some of their 100-day plans, if we look at them, we'll focus on professional learning community structures. Like how does that team talk about data, like that Cora is referring to, how do they talk about the tier 1 instructional practices that happen? So my job is to help coordinate those efforts and really keep a pulse on what's going on. Another part of my day will be walking through classrooms, using a walkthrough tool to like check on teaching and learning, how we're doing with assessment practices, how we keep those growing. So.
All right, just reflecting on what everybody said, I think I'm most excited to hear our principals and our DLCs talk about how they feel efficacious around this process. And if their teachers can feel the same way that they are feeling, then we're on our way to student impact. So I just wrote down 3 words as Joanna was talking because I didn't really know what I was going to say, but 3 things come to my mind that I think SAIL is going to offer us as a system. Number 1, it's the multiplier effect. Okay, so we want a common language and we want common goals and standards that we're trying to reach. And we want to multiply that and cascade it, to use another language, across our system. So that's what SAIL, I believe, affords us. I also think that we're working every day, and I'm working with my secondary administrator teams on sustainability for leadership habits, as I say. So we can all fall off in our workouts and our fitness routines and whatever we set our goals for. Part of my main job is to make sure that we don't fall off and that we can scale our leadership habits throughout the continuous improvement process. And we get better and better so that someone isn't always there reminding of us of it. It's just a habit. And I think third, when I think about SAIL, I think about scalability. We need to, and we are striving for the point where we can get scalability on impactful practices that increase student achievement. And when you find those buildings and systems and structures that are making an impact on student achievement, we need to scale that across our 15 schools. And that is another, I think, goal of this administration. And our coaching is to be able to scale those practices throughout all of our schools for all of our kids.
Thank you all so much. I want to open it up to the board for any questions, curiosities, reflections, anything that you heard. Go ahead, Jeff.
First, thanks. Really like the sound of it is fantastic. Just from the collaborative angle and the involvement of teachers and building, I'm sure there's a real sense of ownership there. the phrase that I'm curious about is brutal facts. It came up a few times and it sounds like something that we ought to know. It's pretty direct language and, I think much needed. I'm curious how it's developed, if you could provide an example, and what does it look like when you start to find solutions for those brutal facts?
Mhm.
Anybody?
Do you want to, you can start, Corey. Mhm.
So our identification of our brutal facts started with data. In the spring, I met with our leadership team, every school leadership team, and we did a data protocol looking at their state report card data, their forward, pre-ACT, secure, and ACT data, and started breaking it down into subgroups. So what is it that, when you're looking at this, what is it that you're seeing that's coming out to you? What are the brutal facts that we see in front of us and know that we need to take action to get better? And so every school did that. We came with 5 data pictures or pieces of data. And then from that, they chose which priorities they chose, what were their 2 brutal facts, and then they moved from there. That was the first milepost.
I'll also add this, Mr. Becker, I think you asked a great question. I think as educators, we don't like to make excuses. And so I think it's easy for us to say, well, you know, we didn't do well because of this. But we have to identify what we're not doing well, though. And just be honest about that and say that all kids can do if we do this. And when we sort of did an autopsy of things, there were some things that we were not doing up to the level that we could be doing. And I think that's when we say brutal facts, it's, you know, it's not putting those things to the side and making excuses about them. But let's just do better. Let's do better. Let's do what we have to do for all kids. All kids can do. They can. It's up to us, the trained professionals, to provide them that opportunity to do.
A good example we did this week, we went over some data. And right away, teachers were having those excuses, you know, such as, well, the test is, you know, biased against this group and the wording on this test. And we're like, that could be, but that aside, this is where our students are scoring. And they are capable of scoring here. And so we had to have some deep conversations that you can, you know, put those out there, but then let's get down to the work. And what can we do to change that?
I'll just add, we as a district team found just so many areas that we could improve in supporting the leadership team. So principals, coaches, APs, deans, everyone, and like them feeling a lot more self-efficacy around data. Like, what is this telling me? What do we do as next steps? So that's been a big part of our learning as a district team as well. Like, we need to support principals and their teams to be able to support staff.
Will we be getting an update in maybe 200 days? Where you're at and what that looks like? I mean, first front of days, I'm sure it's all like, but I would love to hear updates and I would love to hear, like, I think our district is extremely good at the deeper learning competencies and the language around that, but seeing a change within districts and talking to teachers of like data and all that kind of stuff, instructional practice, that'll be interesting. I would like to see, you know, is that something we can ask teachers during the cycles, like, what work do you associate with this work? And do we have a commonality going on in the district so that, you know, at this level and leadership level, we can say, oh, it's work, that piece is there. We're starting to get there.
Well, one thing that we are measuring as a district team is we're asking the same 3 questions throughout all professional learning, from our leadership team to teacher levels for our district-wide professional development days, to give us feedback on one of our main goals, which is to provide coherence and transparency about what we're working on. So if that's a measure that we can bring, you know, forward, but I would also love to bring more schools and include teacher leaders to kind of update throughout the year as we go through this process. Yes, Mr. Lee.
I know that we're talking about student outcomes and looking at a 3 on the report card. And I heard that DPI is going to be adjusting how they score some of the stuff. And so I just wondered, have you thought at all about apples and apples comparison? When you're looking at, well, if we want to move everything to a 3 or above, is a 3 what it used to be? And how is that going to go into the evaluation of this process working or not?
So I'm gonna start Corey. Corey's been coaching me in this, so, and then I'll let her add in. So yes, and with what we chose in terms of the growth, that shouldn't be impacted because it's the same for the entire system, meaning the entire state. So we're still comparing Black students last year to other Black students last year in that subcategory, and we'll be doing the same thing this year. So any shifts in scoring will impact our students just as they would impact any other subgroup of students across the state. So what we chose strategically, like, should not, it will be able to compare that. But Corey, do you want to speak to any other shifts?
So they changed the language in the identification. So where we're really used to seeing below basic, basic, proficient, advanced, that language changed to developing, approaching, meeting, and then advanced. So the language has changed. The two tests are not necessarily meant to be compared to each other because the two tests are built on different state standards. They were different tests. The questions were different. It was written differently. What we can do is look at the way students grew. We know that growth is measured by looking at 1 year's test and then comparing where they are on the next year's test. And even though the tests are different, we know that kids are going to score a certain amount away from the last test they took. So like Alyssa said, they're comparing that entire subgroup together and then looking at that subgroup in our district. So it allows us to understand that it is a different test. It gives us a whole new baseline starting now. But we can still look at how our kids are growing and use that data to move forward so that 3 or 1 year's growth, it can still be measured even though the tests are different because it's about how the kids scored here and how they scored now.
Okay. Jane?
All right, so, I'm trying to articulate. So as a board member, I'm about the district and like all the schools, right? And so as I listen, I commend the work and I say, I love that you are trying to have consistency and you're all using the same, what I would call a structure. You're using a theory of action. You're using the 100-day plan. You're all doing that same work and you all have coaches and you're the one of the greatest things we can do is to put our time and effort into our principles and let that trickle down. And I love the way we're moving. But as Jody was referring to, she called it scaling practices. That's where I'm hung up a little bit. So, you know, like Chris, you guys sat down and, you know, you said we're going to embrace collaborative frameworks. You know, we're really going to work on that at Irving Elementary. And here's what it's going to look like. And that's what Irving has decided to work on. And here's a 100-day plan. Lovely. But Horace Mann isn't going to maybe do that exact same thing. So now I'm getting pockets of excellence in collaborative work, but I want everyone to be doing those. So my question is, we all know, and I understand that every school has to have their own identity and their own what they're working for, and their populations are different. But as a district, you know, are we all working on a collaborative framework? I think like we designed tier 1 instruction with differentiation and scaffolding. That is so vague to me. And you're working on that. Is everybody working on that one? Because I think that's a really great place to start. And then if so, what does that differentiation look like? What does scaffolding truly look like? So you know what I mean? Like I want those specifics and I want everyone to be saying as a collective, this is what we're doing. And I'm not feeling that that's what's happening. It might be where we're going, but what happens is like when Walker when Walker really embraced something, And then nobody else did, and they became these experts on this one area. And go see Walker and, oh, let's learn from what, I don't like that model. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. If you want to go first, Jody, then I'll have it. Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Gosh, Jody.
I think the goal would be to flatten the structure. And part of the job of Joanna and myself is to be the conduit with the great and make sure the great is everywhere. So when I say scalability, that's what I mean.
Right.
If there is a collaborative structure and it's maybe something that the district hasn't created, which we tried to do first, right? We try to say, here's your district data protocol on analyzing student work. We'd like everyone to use this
Yes.
protocol, right? Like that is what we're trying to sustain and then scale. So when I say scalability, that's absolutely what we're looking for.
Mhm.
We no longer want pockets of excellence. We
Right.
want the entire district to be excellent.
Right.
So when I say scalability, that's what we're working towards. And I think yeah, the importance of coaching is just that, making sure our principals feel that they're not on an island doing the work and feeling supported for that work. That's my initial thought.
Right.
Please.
I want to add something about the high quality explicit instruction. So that
Mhm.
was like number one on our
Yes.
100-day plan, because everyone was saying, and if we went to every school, they would say something different. So we were like, we need something. So we literally looked at best practices and combined that with the PDSA cycle and created a framework of high quality explicit instruction. So I can send it out to everyone to see. But that framework then has been shared and we've walked through it as a leadership team. And then schools are rolling that out in their buildings. Some rolled it out in August and some were like, we need to go into September and get some, get people situated with theory of action first, and then they're rolling that out. But then all of our professional learning, everything is tying back to the high quality explicit instruction framework. So that it has already been defined. That was defined
Okay.
this summer, because same thing, we were like, we're all standing on different ground if
Right.
we're all pointing to different things.
Mhm.
And I would say that is in every single theory of action across our system.
Okay.
So that's where it's different, where we had some schools that were excelling in this and that and the other. But when we look at our data is telling us we have an issue with tier 1 instruction. Students are not having access every day to grade level instruction. They're not. And even if they're not at grade level, then we need to use intentional scaffolding. And that's the professional learning, the work that we've started already this summer through depth and complexity, but will continue
Mhm.
throughout the year. So it is really building capacity around what does it mean to scaffold and differentiate to be able to ensure all students have access. But Joanna, you were going to add something.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, so the high quality explicit instruction framework is really, it's not like a checklist of this is what lessons look like. This is the process that it's plan, do, study, act. So what does planning look like in our district? What does collaboration look like? What does the doing look like? What does the act and study? It does lay those out, and that will also be part of our, as a district, like our direct impact is leaders, right? Leaders' direct impact is teachers. So some buildings are very much excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat. Are very much ready to talk about the structure of their PLC. Like they have established teams, they've got, use of core resources happening. Other buildings are like, we know we need to also tighten up that in our building, but first we needed to start within our first 100 days, really implementation, use of core resources to make sure that our teachers are using vetted high quality resources, number one, while we build capacity and talk about planning and collaboration. So I think there will be that concept. We
Okay.
want all that too. And I think that I was just going to mention, it's really once, when you get eyes on, especially for you, once you get eyes on like the framework, I think it will make a lot more sense to ground some of the work.
Mhm.
This has it laminated, so it must be.
Turning around with her, it's like on their table.
Absolutely. Yeah, so everybody's going to be working that plan to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for.
yeah.
And I'm looking for, and just some feedback to you guys as you, and I noticed this when you were talking to new teachers, Alyssa.
Mhm.
So we give a really, really good explanation and it's really clear. But then one of the things that I think the human brain needs is a specific example, like an anchor text, like something to anchor onto. And I feel like that's what we're missing when we hear these presentations. So guaranteed and viable curriculum. Okay, I understand that's the what. You do a really good job with that. Now, can we have an example of that? Like we know fifth graders need to write a 3-paragraph essay. That's the anchor. That's the something that we are all working on. And then going to what would explicit instruction look like, direct instruction look like? I feel like we need more anchors for the board and for the public to understand what we're working on. Like, do you know what I mean? Because once you do that, once you say as an example, it's like, oh, now I get it.
Mhm.
Because I feel like they're just just words sometimes, unless you know, like,
What it looks like and.
really, you've lived it.
Yep, and I think that's part of our work that we've started last year, but are continuing this year is to have, when we talk about the high quality explicit instruction, that framework is something that everyone understands kind of across of our system, right?
Mhm.
When people see a theory of action, they know what that is about.
Yeah.
They know,
Right.
right? So and then last year we started building data analysis protocols and student work analysis protocols that are standard across our system.
Mhm.
So exactly, because in education, there are a lot of words thrown around,
Right,
but those words, I mean, the words we're using have meaning and have power.
right,
And we are accountable to and holding ourselves accountable to the 100-day plan. So the things that we're saying we're doing are like we are producing,
Mhm.
but we also have to move at a rate where we're creating, but then we're building capacity
Mhm.
and understanding of what those tools are and how to use them across the system. And so that's been the work of like with leadership all summer, everything we did revolved around our theory of action. We tied back to it. Probably obnoxiously sometimes where we're like, here's the theory of action, here's how this connects. But that is important that the words, that it doesn't become words. It's like a framework or something we can point to.
so one more thing.
Mhm.
So, student-centered coaching, right? I see a lot of similarities in what you're doing through, your explicit instruction, your tier 1 instruction, and looking at the data. Isn't that what we've been doing? I mean, when you sit down with a group of teachers as a coach and we take them through the protocol, I mean, I feel like we've been doing that. Are we continuing to do those specific student-centered where you take a look at the data, you plan the instruction, you implement, the coach has a job, you get back together. Are we doing that?
Yep, go ahead, Erin. You start.
I think what I love about this, because every building is around high quality instruction and data. It's a bigger conversation that we can have.
Mm.
I think what was missing, since I've been a coach is that I could go and coach one teacher,
Right,
but it was just on what they were doing. We didn't have that common language and we didn't have, like, we had our school improvement plan,
right,
but there was so much, variables and so much, autonomy where the teachers could choose what they wanted to get coached on. This is
Okay.
very targeted. Our whole building is working on the same thing, so I can now coach teams
okay.
and have the same conversation that I was doing one-on-one.
Ooh,
And then I could bring it to 2 teams and bring those teams together,
nice.
and we're having the same conversation, and we're going way deeper.
Do
Like
great
they're-
little bands and everything.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But we also, we still do the one-on-one students in our coaching, especially like if teachers are reaching out for it.
Sure,
But now it's just at a deeper level and more people are involved at one time.
Mm.
But we're still using Diane Sweeney and all of those great
Okay.
tools.
I
Mhm.
think that's wonderful. It was always such a barrier for coaches to work with a group of teachers but then you're working with that group of teachers. And then when, I might not get to you until April, but so that's
Mhm.
wonderful to hear.
And Keith is also pushing in and supporting at the teacher level in those collaborative teams as well, and aligning with what the school is working on. So one thing that we didn't mention that I think is really exciting about the work is the transparency across schools. So in previous years, there wasn't as much transparency around data, and like we were kind of cautious about how we shared it. There's a lot more like openness of like, this is where we are. We are a system, we are a team. Man is only as good as Walker is, and across the board, right? So we're trying to uplift like everyone, and so transparency around data as well as all of their plans. So their 100-day plans as well as their theory of actions, all the work they did is in one shared document across our system. So Chris and Aaron, if they're like a little stuck and they know all the other elementaries are working on similar things, they can go look, and then they can call up like pushing and be like, hey, we're also working on this. Can we talk about it? I mean, the level of collaboration between principals this year has been unlike anything I've seen, and that's a huge credit to our coaches. But I think that transparency of like, we're all of our plans are out there, everyone can see them. And then take it a step further, everyone who's going through SAIL this year, they can see each other's plans from across systems. So we can look at Janesville and what they're working on, we can, right? So like everything is pretty transparent, open, because we know that in public education, we're faced with the same challenges. We're all trying to problem solve the same thing and increase the best outcomes for our kids. So let's like work smarter. So the collaboration has been, I think, a huge thing we've been focused on this summer.
Jane, you had mentioned that there are pockets of like greatness, you know, like here. This has really brought everybody together that
Good.
like, there's not like this competition.
Mm.
Like, I feel like there used to be competition between schools of like, who could have the best PBL projects or things like that, and now it's like a sharing community versus we gotta top that, you know?
And I have said this numerous times, just the elementary principals, our collaboration is incredible. Like, I've never been part of a team that's been so collaborative and yet also very vulnerable, because there's not one of us that, you know, we all know we have to grow. We're all learning and growing together. And so we've got a couple new principals this year, which has been great because they are coming from other systems. So they've been able to give us information, feedback on things that have worked for them. So as they're learning, you know, things that are happening in West Dallas, we're learning from them as well. And Joanna started this collaboration. It has just been off the chart. So it's been wonderful.
That's great.
Mr. Burns.
Sure. So I had a couple of questions. The one that I wanted to approach first was the "so that" statement, big typical growth and aggressive growth in our students. And we're doing that so that we can close the gap, right, between our lower achieving and our higher achieving students. But the way that that's written right there, and it might be the older sibling in me, where my siblings got all the focus, but it kind of says to me that our successful kids, we're going to just kind of let them ride the wave, and we're going to really push our lower end kids. We've also been talking a lot about gifted and talented this year and bring that in, and that's not really in there. And I mean, as a parent, if I want, typical growth, it's great, but that's kind of meeting expectations. Like, I want my kid to push towards exceeding expectations and be higher up than where they are at. So it seems like we're leaving out our whole top end. And so by letting the uppers slide along and pushing them, we're actually raising the lowers and keeping the other ones where they are. And so I see this as kind of a non-challenging statement for our upper level kids.
Well, let me clarify a few things. One is the terms typical growth and aggressive growth come through FastBridge. And what that means Because it is, I would say, quite a rigorous goal. So if a student is above grade level, they need to stay above grade level. That is the goal. So that does not mean that if you're already above grade level, that means that beginning of the year, that teacher is scaffolding up to your level, or we are grade accelerating students through our GT programming to stay above grade level. Because what we have found is what you're speaking to is that when we haven't been paying attention to that, students have slid back. So, and again, it's at minimum. At minimum, you're above grade level, you're staying above grade level. You are at least making that growth. And then for our students that are below grade level, and again, I don't like these terms either because it feels just like boxing kids in, but we have to have like quantitative data we're looking at. Because when we aren't, that's when we risk. They're fine, they'll be okay, right? Like those kind of statements that I do hear. No, we have to be able to point to quantitative data and say like, this is the type of growth they need. And it, for students that are below grade level, it will take multiple years of aggressive growth, which simply means multiple years of over a year and a half plus within 1 year of growth. So previously, when I've taught multilingual students that were new to the country, I knew in my time with them, it was never enough to do 1 year's growth, which you know that we have to do. I was aiming for 2 or 2+ within a year, because that's the only way I'm going to close opportunity gaps for them so that they can achieve beyond. So, and looking at our baseline data, I was actually surprised to see that our students that are at grade level or above are actually consistently staying there more frequently than our students that are below. Meaning the students that are below, we actually are not growing them a year and a half, even a year in many cases. So there is, we're very cognizant of the slide, and we're very cognizant of only focusing here, because that's what we've been like saying a lot, is we need to focus on the students who are further behind. But the things that our analysis that just came out and what we really need to dig into as teams is like, what have we been doing with those students? Because those strategies actually haven't been necessarily moving the needle for the majority of those students. So I hope that brought some clarity to those. I mean, like, I understand typical growth maybe isn't the term I would use, but that is what it is in FastBridge, and that simply means we're keeping them where they are, like at grade level or above grade level, which means if you're above grade level, we're scaffolding up from the beginning. So you're getting differentiated instruction from the beginning.
It makes sense to me. I still don't like it. And I think that that'll be a point of contention for people that maybe don't see or hear that description later. And so when they look at this, be like, well, no one's pushing my kid. They're any students, so they're just gonna sit there. I mean, I think that there's something that
Fair,
just to in verbiage and looking at or putting a key in there of what typical
Yeah, I
growth
like that.
means.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to just define typical growth means 1 year's growth. So in essence, we're saying a student who's coming in at grade level or above. So even if they're above, they're gonna be in our classrooms. K-12 for 1 full year, they need to make 1 full year's growth, everybody. If you're below, you need to be making more. So no, our college and low risk have it. We actually still need to push them quite a bit because they have to make an entire year's growth in a year's time. So the expectation that's not like, oh, great, you're good, you stay where you are. You still have to make a year's growth in a year's time in our classroom. But I think that's it. That's an easy addition, because you're right. Some people might go like, oh, well, you know.
Yeah, with
So
the
defining
verbiage.
just
Yeah.
What's the point of pushing if they're
Yeah.
just gonna?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I mean, but that definition, I think, and that being explicit about what that means, I think is really good. I guess too, how many kids take the FastBridge? Like, how many grade levels take it?
All the K through 10, 10th grade.
So then this plan doesn't apply to 11 and 12?
So their theories of action are based around the pre-ACT and ACT. So they are, and Jody, you can speak to that if you want more to the secondary level. So everyone does take that, and then with the pre-ACT and ACT, they're also taking practice tests, because that was a gap that we were finding was most of them were taking one practice test and then the actual test. But it doesn't give you 3 points of data to see growth towards standards. And so now we have 2 practice tests along with the actual test in the spring as a measure.
So but they have a different plan than this one then?
They do, they have it customized, so a little bit how, what's your say, Chris? It's the same, so that they're by the district. Yeah. Most schools did, I know my kids did, but our 3 high schools, they're just a little bit, they're using the ACT as this, so that, and then they're using some of their subgroup data around the ACT growth for their nearby.
So are they on their own or are they vertically aligning with what this plan is?
They're vertically aligning. In fact, Hale's plan, they actually kept the FastBridge through 10th grade to use that as a data point too. So they're all aligned in the same way. And they, let's see, Central and Godkey have exactly the district's thereby statement because their data also showed that they were below the 3.0 for the value add.
Okay, and then I guess too, my other question on that with the high schools is how is that the implementation of this? And I say that because, you know, elementary schools are much more focused where every teacher is teaching all the topics for all of their students where, you know, in my experience, you might have someone teaching all physics and someone teaching all chemistry, and then somebody teaching earth science, biology, physics, chemistry, and then computer science. So that's a lot of buy-in and a lot of, because each one of those departments kind of becomes its own school within a school, I guess, because they have their own curriculum, they have their own expectations, they have the things that are to push their students. How is that buy-in with getting people along the same lines and reading and the math component for,
Yeah.
say, art?
So I love that you brought that up because that's the complexity of a high school principal. And the ownership and buy-in has to happen, no matter if you're teaching art, physical education, AP Calc, or the core ELAs. So they are trying to build, again, ownership and where that department sees themselves in their theory of action. So this year, they've done this in the past, but they're even being more specific. And as we align our ACT, our pre-ACT with our ACT, our practice ACT, they're asking departments, which part of the ACT are you going to focus your SLO work? And where can you incorporate strategies that are based either on the science section, the reading section, the math section? So they're all doing that right now as they build their teacher SLOs. And it doesn't matter if you're a physical educator or an art educator, everyone is expected to see themselves in that goal. So the entire staff, right, 80 staff members can lift towards that goal and not just the 10 in the 4.
And I really like that. And I hope that we can manage that. And I think part of the question and why I'm asking is because as many of our teachers have found, we constantly have a turnover of our program. And so how does this program not become just one more program that they're like, okay, this will be around for a year and then we'll do something else and who cares? So like, that's another piece that we're gonna fight. And I think every school does, because anytime you leadership changes or directorship changes, you start having different philosophies sweep in. And so I can check the box for this year, it'll be gone next year. You know, and how do we prevent that? So how do we make this, if this is effective, how do we make this more long-term?
So let me say something to you, and this is to everybody. This is nothing new. Okay? This is nothing, I mean, you can go to a district in Walla Walla, Washington, they're doing some type of instructional improvement in planning process. It's gonna probably have a different name on it, But it's the same thing. I remember talking with Ms. Carr one time. She said, we used to do this stuff. We don't do it anymore because we had this discussion online. So you're right. Sometimes things come back around, but I think unfortunately, we've kind of lost sight a bit in how we are. Everybody wants what's good and wants to see things improve, but there is no plan to make it happen. And in some instances, rather, the goals weren't that good enough to make it happen. And, you know, to quote Herm Edwards, a goal without a plan is merely a wish. And so what we're trying to do right now is we've created goals and charged our, and plan, and we've charged our schools to do the same thing within the district's plan and goals. So that's where the alignment is. But I think you bring up a good question, because I've heard it over and over on different things. We wait long enough, we can wait this out. I've heard that. I know how that works. You're right. But this is nothing new. It's nothing new. But this is a process that was needed. The logic model that I went through earlier, if you heard the conversation through this the theory of action and through the sale process, a lot of the things that we worked on last year, we just incorporated it within this new plan. Okay, so a lot of the things that the GVC, you heard instructional rounds, you heard feedback, all of these things are incorporated within this plan. And so, you know, are we putting a fresh bow on it? Absolutely, because it's needed. You know, when I hear successful principals like Chris Goff saying, "Oh my God, this is what I've been needing," I think we're heading in the right direction. I really do. And you know, last year I think we were sort of changing the tire as the car was rolling a bit. But I think we used the time in the summertime. Even I sat my large behind down, and I went to class as well. And you're looking at some of the work that's still posted on the wall over there from the summertime. Like, we sat down 2 days. I had to dedicate 2 days to this process, and it was tough because, you know, everything's going on, right? Nothing stops. But we committed to it, and we're committing to, and our schools have as well, and we believe it's going to be successful. I really think you're going to, you know, as the data starts to roll in from last year, you're going to see some improvements. Very confident in that. So that's just a teaser, but unofficially, we don't know what it's going to look like when everything rolls out, but I think you're going to see that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I'm teasing you a little bit too, to try and bait you to come out and tell everyone all that. So I appreciate it. No, I do appreciate all of your work, and I like the collaboration. I like hearing that that's happening. I like that we're looking at it from a vertical standpoint, so we're not on islands even once we're up in the upper levels of the high school. So all of that are things that I like, and everything comes around in schools. It's all cyclical, and it all has a beginning every time. But I think, you know, having that plan, continuing that plan, and doing that is going to be really good. The last question that I have for this is that with the collaboration, I hear the principals are collaborating, which I think is fantastic. And then we've got teachers. Are teachers from the different schools, just as a clarity, are they collaborating as well? So the 4th grade teachers are all collaborating with the other 4th grade teachers and getting those rounds of expectations together. Like,
We're all like, who's gonna talk about it?
So, yeah, the structure of our professional development plan for this year is actually different. We've created pods. So teams are doing all of their professional learning on our student release days. They started at the beginning of the year. It's led by leaders. So we create the plan as a district. It's led by those leaders. And then those grade level teams are kind of creating like their own network. So it's 2 or 3 schools that is their. So when we're going through early literacy training, for example, our 2nd grade team is working, learning, looking at data in their 2nd grade pod. So it's not all 2nd grade teachers that's a very large number to be collaborative, but 2 or 3 buildings of 2nd grade teachers is a really good collaborative team. And then the consistency and kind of the connections between the leaders, our DLCs, our other facilitators of those pods. Does anyone have other things?
So I'll just comment. I think that that effort has been something that we really started last year, and it started with the principals. There were several meetings last year. March comes to mind where we scrapped the meeting and said, you know what, let's just let them pick a campus. Everybody, let's walk together and let's give feedback. Like, we had to kind of start that with principals. So now then I remember going to Irving and guys were saying, hey, guess what? My teachers are walking each other's rooms and they're giving each other feedback. Like, this is the culture that we've really been trying to be intentional about building. It's that collaborative culture. So now we're at the point now, this is not hard for them. They're used to it now. At first it was tough, because they're just not used to it. So, yeah, I think it's an easy transition at this particular.
When I think going back to the one question earlier about spreading the goodness across the district, we have so much more opportunity to talk and plan and share. And like what's working at our building, you know, could work at theirs. So I feel like we've shared strategies way more based on this model that we have in the past.
At the high school level too. or-
Yeah, what we should have had, she was like.
We don't have pods yet, but we could. Our district-based professional development model has also changed this year, where we are department-based on content area. So every opportunity, especially coming up on September 23rd, the morning time will be in department learning. 612, for example, math, where all the schools come together and they're calibrating on standards alignment, assessment development as an entire district.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's exciting.
Other questions from the board?
Well, I had one more,
You already said you didn't, you.
but they said stuff and now I have another question. It was just a little clarifier. I know you said that 2 or 3 schools together. Are you gonna switch those up so everybody gets a little bit of a chance to see the other schools too? And work with those and not like every other time, but just.
Yeah, so for this year, because it's very systematic planning and we want to actually create that collaborative team, like it's very difficult to truly like look at data, plan together, create plans that we're gonna actually then say, okay, what are we bringing back next time we meet in 6 weeks at the next professional development day? So this year, the plan will be that their pod is their pod. But yes, there are other opportunities. So we also have leaders going in through our math implementation rollout plan. For example, we're building in other opportunities where teams are learning together. The leaders are in other buildings and we're kind of walking around like, okay, what would be coaching? What are some next steps? So there are other ways that yes, we're in other buildings. And certainly we could talk about next year. Do we keep the pods? Is there benefit to changing them? So that answers.
Thank you.
Hold his hands, Joe.
So, I have this button, I think it works on this mic. No, questions are good, that's why we're here, right? So I have heard some good things about SAIL from some of the teaching staff through some of the inquiries that I've been making. And so a lot of what I've been hearing about the collaboration, more planning time, things like that, have been criticisms that I've heard in years past. And that there's a lot more of a feeling within buildings of more preparedness for the year before it started. And having more direction as to where everyone is going. And so I think that is a good benefit of what this work has been. And I'm looking forward to see the fruits of those labors as we continue with the testing and so forth for our students. One thing I want to bring up here again, and this is more directed towards our high schools, when we're talking about standardized testing, which I know we all love. But some of the more intangible things that indicate success with our students, and I would love to see some sort of measure within SAIL that would be able to measure that. And what I'm talking about is what are students' life goals that may not include an ACT. And I do understand this is focused on that because that's what's in the report card. There isn't an intangible thing within the report card that we can get a grade for, but for our district, I would like to see something like that come out of it, because not everyone who doesn't do good on the ACT means that they're going to fail in life.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of times that's how things are looked at. Oh, your scores are low. It's as such, your students are not being successful. And we know that's not true. And so thinking about this from this perspective, I'd love to try to figure out a way that we can look at what are our high schoolers' goals in their lives. And even if that doesn't include doing well on the ACT, how can we still incorporate that in our district's report card? Saying that, yes, X% of seniors have a plan or have achieved their plan for what they want to do next. That's what I would like to see.
And I think what you're alluding to can be what some districts will call a graduation plan or an advisory plan of some sort. That could be something that we can really look at. I know that Alyssa and Laura Sage have really been working with our counselors in trying to figure out how are we tracking our kids for future success. So not just graduation, but beyond that. But the first thing is to get them to graduation. Okay. And but we have to start as early as 5th grade when we look at things like that.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I think we wait until 11th, 12th grade year and say, oh, we're in trouble. Then it's just too late. And so last year, just bringing you into a conversation. This is one of the nightmares I have. I have a lot of nightmares at night about student success and students not being successful. And one of the nightmares I have is that we're going to get to May and this parent is going to call me and say, you failed my child because they can't graduate in next week. And they are right when they say that. Why do I say that? Because following the first semester in 9th grade, we should start bringing parents in and saying, your kid is off track for graduation. We got to do something right now. Instead of waiting
Mhm.
to give them that bad news a week before graduation. So that's part of that conversation that we're looking into as to how we take responsibility in tracking our students for success. So that is part of that conversation. Joe, do you have something?
So just, we can easily give you, so Noah, on the report card, on the state report card, I think it's page 7 on the top, gives you like the life ready kind of indicators. So work experience, music opportunities, industry credential and things like that. So we have that data absolutely that we can track over time. I think that speaks to the soft skills that you're talking about and still increasing those factors. So we can easily give you that in some updates.
Well, so the ACT being a thing that not everyone takes. So you're talking about 3 data points. Not all students are going to have 3 data points. And so they're not going to either be able to be included as fully or included at all in that analysis. And so how do you then say that those students are successful or not successful based off of this test that they like, I don't need that. I don't want to spend money on that. And so I don't want to study for it. I'm going to focus on my goals. But that isn't looked at as a negative on the report card because they're not included in that number. And so that's what I'm really trying to get at, because I think there's a decent portion of our community who doesn't care about the ACT because that's not what they wanted to do. That's not what their life goals require them to take. But that isn't captured in that report card, and that isn't your fault. That's a limitation of what the report card is. But I think in today's day and age, this is something that this is something that, there's a lot more things besides the ACT and what that can represent for people that still indicate our students are being successful in what they want to do.
But you mentioned something, you said goal setting.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is are we sitting with kids and establishing what those goals are for them? And are they telling us what their goals are? And then are we now we know what those goals are we helping them create that plan to make sure they're successful? And that's something that we can track as a district through that. Because if a kid doesn't want to go to college, he wants to get a trade, then how are we putting that kid in a position to receive that particular certification.
Mhm.
So when he graduates, he can go make more money than I.
Mhm.
Like, that's what I mean. So we can definitely do that.
Goal
part of that.
setting in freshman year, something like that.
I mean, again, that stuff actually starts in, being honest, I mean, it starts in 5th grade. That's when we start losing. Because if a kid says, I want to be a doctor, and a kid doesn't like science and math, okay, what are you good at? Let's have a different conversation. Like, what interests you? What are you good at? And trying to help them with that direction and go in the right direction, that those pathways to success. And I think that's what, as a district, we have to really target that. So I agree with you though. No worries. Rebecca.
Well, I'm just kind of piggybacking on what you guys were talking about, because my son that graduated just this last year, perfect example of, he was on opposite ends of the spectrum, either want to go to school to be a vet or go into the trades. I don't know about that. It was very either or, and he ended up going into the trade. So I think because we're so data driven sometimes, which is great, but I think we have to kind of, like, times change, we have to change with them. And I think a lot of the data we collect isn't always relevant to the ways the trends are changing. And so, like, I look at my first son graduated in 21, and then I have one that just graduated in 24. And as I would sit at different, senior things and listen to the plans of these seniors, and just compared to, many moons ago when I was in, graduating, and the trends are changing. Not as many kids are going into the 4-year schools. And like Dr. Robinson mentioned, and Noah mentioned that, not a lot of them are even having to take the ACTs. I mean, the fact that I got my son to go and take them was pretty impressive. So because I was pretty sure he wasn't going to show up to take them. You didn't necessarily need them for the trades. Some companies look at them, but not all of them, and so I just think to come up with a better way to look at everybody instead of just those kids or the group that's going to go into a 4 or more year, degree or something. Because I do feel like there's a huge group that's kind of left out when it comes to looking at the data that doesn't tell the true story. So I think there's a lot that's missed. And I think because, like, I have two that didn't go to away to college, I feel like, I take it kind of personal, like they are very smart kids, but I don't feel like they're part of that data that's usually collected, so I'm hoping that in time we can find a better way to gauge that for that group. Because I think it's going to continue to go that way for a while.
She took mine.
Okay.
Corey, what were you gonna say?
So we are using a ACT prep course called Onto College. One of the courses within that includes resources for specific skills in math to target for the trades. And there are certain score ranges on the ACT, which all of our students take. All freshmen, all sophomores take the pre-ACT secure, and all of our juniors take the ACT in their junior year. It is part of the accountability system for the state, but it automatically gives them that score for college entry, for trade school entry, and for scholarship applications. One of the things that the program does is actually set the purpose in terms of an ACT score does more for you than just get you into a 4-year college. It does help you get funding and scholarships into the other programs that you may go into outside of school. So the nice thing is Onto College highlights that for our students and then has specific assignments and pieces to it that show you this is why this skill is important because you use it here in the trades, which I personally really liked. Because I don't think all of our kids are following that.
Well, parents, I didn't realize that, so I think it'd be nice. And I think that's where we lose that face-to-face conversation. Sorry, but like, I know I'm taking it off from you, man. It's just gonna happen, but just that face-to-face conversation though too, I think is lost because there's a lot of that in communication where I actually got to, I kind of miss the elementary school conferences because I miss that face-to-face of talking to the teacher instead of just having to log in all the time. Cause you can only tell so much from logging in on the Skyward and looking for things sometimes that there's so much that's missed in actual communication amongst parents and teachers, stuff like that. Like, I know that they're important, but, sometimes hearing it from me versus my son hearing it from you or his counselor can definitely resonate very differently. And I think a lot of that is missed too, because so much is just
from a screen. You know, I guess I'm old school, but I think there's a lot to be said about sometimes just sitting down and having a conversation with someone to learn those things too, that I think we've gotten so far away from that I think would help some kids if they, you know, and parents, if they knew that, for parents to check in, like, I don't know if it was Mr. Lee or Mr. Robinson that had said it too, that, you know, to be able to check in and not, you know, like kind of like a conference type thing or whatnot, to actually, you know, see how things are going instead of waiting till it's too late and then finding out they're not doing good, you know, because right now you have to rely on looking at Skyward. Well, when I had all 4 of my kids in school, I wasn't checking Skyward weekly to find out what was going on, you know, but I did have a situation with my one son where, I mean, he was like failing a class, and by the time I found out, he was coming out of middle school, and I thought, oh my God, you know, I mean, fortunately, we worked it all out and it was fine, but just that human contact sometimes we're missing it.
Okay, anything else? Well, thank you for spending this evening with us to give us an update on sale. I think we're all, we like what we're hearing and looking forward to see, I mean, this is the, you know, step 1 of 100 billion. So looking forward to see as you get through more steps and seeing some of those outcomes that we're looking to see. And then modifying those goals as we keep going through our next 100 days and next 100 days, right? All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You guys,
for
your
time.
I told Alyssa, this is an amazing team and this is just a small part of it. So like, thank you.
They-
All right, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Or adjourned.